How do you get back to doing an exercise like this after a quad strain? Tune in to find out. Prehab, welcome back to the channel. Dr. Craig Lindell, and today let's talk about quad strains and exercises that you can do to rehab a quad strain so that you can get back to doing the things that you enjoy doing without pain. Before we dive into quad strain exercises to do, let's be sure we have a thorough understanding of the role of the quadriceps muscle group and what a muscle strain is, because a solid understanding of these two things helps us to treat this injury in the best way possible. First, the quadriceps. It's a series of 4 muscles that make up our thigh, specifically on top of the thigh. These muscles include the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, the vastus medialis, and the vastus intermedius. These 4 muscles help us with several motions, including straightening the knee and controlling bending of the knee. The rectus femoris muscle specifically crosses 2 joints, allowing both the straightening of the knee and the flexing of the hip. Keep this in mind as we begin to discuss muscle strains, as this is really important. So muscle strains, what are they? A muscle strain occurs when we move our muscle tissue through a range of motion and at a load that it cannot support or tolerate. This results in damage to the muscle tissue and what we call a strain. We see in the literature that muscles which cross 2 joints, such as the rectus femoris crossing both the knee and the hip joint, are more likely to develop a muscle strain, especially when doing high velocity movements like sprinting, kicking, or jumping. Thus, you guessed it, the rectus femoris is the culprit when it comes to most quad strains. Personally, this was the first major injury I suffered growing up playing soccer. Sad to say, I didn't prehab it, nor did I rehab it properly. While quad strains can feel frustrating and confusing, as many people aren't sure where to start for rehab, like myself when I was a teenager, we know that rehab can be a very effective way to tackle your quad strain, and the sooner you start rehab, the better. Thus, today's a different day. You're going to learn from my mistakes, and we're going to get you a better outcome. All the exercises I'm about to show you, as well as several awesome variations and dozens of other exercises, can be found in our knee rehab and knee prehab program, which has been designed to get those quads strong. So let's get into it. As mentioned, it's important to start rehab early. In fact, one study showed athletes who started rehab 2 days after an injury, in comparison to people that waited 9 days following an injury, it actually allowed them to return to the sport 3 weeks earlier without increasing their risk of re-injury. So where do we start? We're going to start with loading that muscle. So in early rehab, we're going to start with easy isometric exercises. That's because when we're dealing with a muscle strain, an isometric exercise is going to challenge the tissue. It's going to activate that muscle fibers. It's going to create tension. But because the muscle isn't moving through length, we can feel a little bit more comfortable with it not causing extra damage to muscle tissue that is already damaged. So what's a great early isometric exercise? It's going to be doing a quad set. So you can get set up on the ground, you can get set up on a table, or here with a bench. And with our legs straight, we're just going to be focused on flexing our quad muscle as hard as we can. Hold that for a few seconds, and then relax, and then repeat. What you should feel is all the muscles on top of your thigh working to help straighten your knee. So if my knee was a little bit bent, I'm gonna flex my quad, getting the knee straight. Few things to focus on with this exercise. You wanna get your knee as straight as you can, depending on how much knee extension range of motion you have. You should be able to get a little bit of a heel pop. That's always a good sign of like, hey, getting my quad fully activated, getting my knee fully straight. Because of how I'm sitting in this position, if you're getting any issues in your back, like flexibility issues, you can always kind of point your foot down just to give yourself some slack on the nerves in the back of your leg. But we're just focused on activating our quad as much as we can tolerate. If it does hurt a little bit, it's going to sound counterintuitive. I want you to actually flex and squeeze harder. The more that we can get this muscle activated, the better your quad is going to feel, but try to keep that pain to less than 4 to 5 out of 10. I would say 4 out of 10 max, but you're gonna flex as hard as you can, you're gonna relax, and then you're gonna repeat. I typically like to have people do this after a quad strain. Hey, let's do 2 to 3 sets. You're gonna do like 15 to 20 reps until it gets pretty fatigued and tired, and then take a break. I would say total working time, 5 to 10 minutes daily. And you can even do this up to 2 times a day. This is really going to help with activating that muscle, getting the knee working properly, doing what it needs to do when you're walking, and you should feel less pain when you're walking. All right, the next exercise that we're going to do is a wall sit. Again, we're doing another isometric exercise. Our muscles are working, but nothing is moving. And we're doing that because, hey, it's still early on in that quad strain. Still doesn't feel the best, may feel a little bit weak and painful. Isometric exercise is a perfect way to activate those muscles and feel a little bit less pain. We're building on the quadricep because now we're doing it in a closed kinetic chain environment. Our feet are connected to the ground. Really important what to focus on with a wall sit when we're dealing with the quad strain. Ideally, our shins, we have a positive angle, meaning they're not just completely perpendicular to the ground. They are actually leaning a little bit forward that direction. What does that mean? Our knees are over our toes. As long as I focus on having my chest completely upright, perpendicular to the ground, I'm going to feel my quads more. If you're leaned forward, you're going to be getting help from the muscles on the back of your legs, like your hamstrings and your glutes. Whereas when we're completely upright, we're really going to challenge those quads more. Just me leaning upright, I'm like, oh, I already feel my quads a little bit more. So that is going to be an excellent exercise when rehabbing a quad strain. Ideally, start in the position that you can tolerate, and then the lower that you can get, the further back that your feet can be, closer to the wall or whatever is supporting you, the harder it will be on those quads. All right, next up, we have an anterior step down on a wedge. We're moving from an isometric exercise to an isotonic exercise. We're actually moving through range of motion. Ideally, we're even doing this single leg. That is really going to challenge the knee, especially the quadriceps, and you're going to keep progressing that quad strain. If you can't do single leg, you can just start with double leg. Again, we're really going to focus on standing nice and tall, maybe even leaning a little bit back. By just standing tall or leaning back, you're going to have to feel those quads working harder. You don't want to have your hips too far forward because now you're going to put stress on maybe your low back, upper hips, but we just want to be tall enough where we really feel those quads working. And we're using a wedge because now we're taking any limitations in terms of ankle mobility completely out. We're getting our feet already set up in plantar flexion, making it really easy to drive our knees over our toes. So if we go towards the single leg motion, I want you to be nice and tall, really focus on keeping everything engaged. You're nice and balanced, you're rooted into that wedge. Put your hands on your hips, stay nice and tall. Slowly lower down, pause there for a second, and then return to the standing position. The further that you can reach your other foot, the harder that quad is going to have to work. When you are reaching forward, don't put your weight all the way on this side. You're going to take away from making this muscle work. So we're just tapping. I like to tell people, tap an eggshell, don't break it. Be able to pause, own that transition position, meaning, hey, I could even lift this side, and now I know that this leg is really working, and that's how you're going to build a stronger quad. Building off of the anterior step down on the wedge, we're going to keep doing more eccentric exercises. This one is a doozy because we're going to be focused on the rectus femoris. So like I mentioned earlier in the video, probably the most common culprit with quad strains is going to be the rectus femoris, and that's because it crosses two joints, crosses the hip and the knee. And with movements like sprinting, when we're moving really fast and we're moving those joints, what happens is the rectus femoris tends to get put on a lot of stretch. It has to work eccentrically, and then it basically has to rebound, snap like a rubber band, and work concentrically. And usually at the end ranges, during that transition is when people get into trouble and they deal with a muscle strain. To get started with this exercise, ideally you have a table or a high enough bench where you can have your butt right at the edge of it, and then you're going to use a light weight, and you're going to get that set up on the edge of your foot. A light weight may not fit with your shoe, hence we had to take the shoe off here. We got the sock. But we're going to get set up, laying flat on our back. We're going to have our knees supported over our hips. We're going to keep our abs engaged so that we have a flat back. That's really important because that's going to basically anchor where the rectus femoris connects up in our pelvis. So I have to maintain this position. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly lower this leg
keeping my abs engaged, hollowed, flat back, and I'm gonna feel all these muscles in the front of my thigh working. I'll bring it back up, and then I'm gonna repeat nice and slow, lowering that leg like a crane, bring it back up. If you wanna make it really spicy and you wanna hit the rec fem even harder, focus on kicking that weight away from you, trying to straighten your knee a little bit, and you will feel your quad having to work even harder. This is going to really build eccentric strength. You're going to be building strength to tolerate that increase in tension as that muscle is lengthening, which is going to set you up for success, returning back to high velocity movements like sprinting or like kicking. Moving into late stage rehab for quad strains, we want to focus on two things. Number one, we want to keep increasing the load so that we can keep getting that quadriceps stronger. And in addition, we want to find ways to isolate the quadriceps even more while adding in more complex movements so that when you go back to play your sport or do your favorite activity, your quad is ready and primed to deal with whatever stress and load you're going to throw at it. So what's a great exercise to progress towards? It's going to be a reverse Nordic curl. Now, in terms of setup, I'm on a foam pad because it's going to feel better on your knees and your shins. If you go to get set up and you're already feeling a lot of pressure in the front of your shins or on your ankles because your ankle's having the point so far in that direction, get this even a little bit thicker and higher up. In terms of foot position, do you have your feet set up like this? Do you have your feet set up like this? Set up like this is going to make it a little bit easier. It's going to give you more leverage because you're able to push into the ground, pushing yourself forward. Whereas having your foot pointed down this way, it's really going to make you have to isolate working those quads, and you're not necessarily moving so far in that direction, kind of having to move forward in this direction, which is going to put more force on those quads. So in terms of getting set up, we really want to focus on hollowing, flexing your upper abs, really tucking, getting a posterior pelvic tilt, because again, what we're doing is we're setting the anchor for where that rectus femoris attaches. Again, we are doing an eccentric exercise, especially on the quadriceps and the rectus femoris, because we have the hip in extension, which is the opposite of flexion, what the rectus femoris does. And as we move back, we're moving into a greater range of motion of knee flexion. So make sure that you focus on anchoring down here. You'll lower down as slow and controlled as you can. Own that transition phase. Push your feet and your shins into the ground. Return the starting position and repeat. How you would make this harder: you can hold a weight, you can put on a weight vest, you can increase range of motion, you can even get crazy and do single leg versions just to see, hey, how does one side do and compare towards the other. You can even get to what is the real challenging point and kind of hold that isometrically, work on that transition zone, and you will build some gnarly quads. Lastly, we want to focus on incorporating power movements to make sure that you don't deal with this quad strain again. That's what prehab is all about, right? You come to rehab your quad strain, but you should stay to prehab that quad strain and make sure that you don't deal with it again in the future. And if you don't add in the power exercise, you are doing yourself a disservice. Power, meaning we want to move fast, we want to generate a lot of force in the least amount of time. A great exercise that I really like doing is a step up with a knee drive. So being back here, we have that rectus femoris on stretch. The quad itself, those other three muscles, they're kind of flexed, they're shortened. But then when we go to move them into this position, we're shortening the rectus femoris, we're activating that muscle. And then whereas when we're getting that knee bend, we're getting the quadriceps on stretch. So we're kind of moving that rubber band back and forth between the anchor points, but we're kind of recreating what it is that we're going to be doing if we're jumping, if we're running. So you have to work this stuff back in, and you have to do it with intention. And the other leg, the foot that is on the step, well, that quad is working to generate force. So make sure that you do it on both sides. What you want to focus on is get a big stride. That's going to get you into good hip extension. And then from here, shift your weight forward, push as hard as you can with that side. And then at the same time, drive this knee up. But if you can, even add a little bit of pop to it, where you get some air time on this side to really work on flexing this quad, and then also driving that knee up high and fast. Do it on both sides. I would say anywhere from 8 to 12 reps. Once you start losing speed, power, and your pop to it, that's when you know, hey, go ahead and take a break.
So, rehabbing a quad strain takes hard work and dedication, but it can be done with appropriate rehab. A few key takeaways. Number 1, remember that beginning rehab early following a quad strain will be critical to get you back to your sport or your activity. Number 2, with early rehab, it is okay to have discomfort that is up to a 4 out of 10 on the pain scale, but we want to be mindful of listening to our body and checking in with ourselves when this is the case. We can feel more comfortable when doing isometric exercises in a comfortable muscle length position, making sure we're not doing more damage to muscle tissue that is already damaged. Next, muscles that cross 2 joints are typically more susceptible to muscle strains, so we want to make sure that our programming is geared towards strengthening these particular muscles and practicing the movements we want to get back to, like sprinting. Lastly, if looking to take the guesswork out of rehabbing your quad strain, we recommend you check out the knee rehab or knee prehab program to get started with your recovery from the quad strain, and more importantly, make sure that you decrease the risk of a potential quad strain in the future. All right, we hope that you get better with these videos. Make sure that you do every single exercise. Until next time, prehab.
Hey, did you like this video? If you did, you should definitely check out the Prehab app. It includes all of our programs, a brand new workout library, and tons more videos like the one you saw today. Check it out by clicking on this link. You get a free trial. Take control of your health today.